Well, for more on the Fed and the U.S. economy, I'm joined live from Washington, D.C. by journalist and Newsday columnist Dan Raviv. Welcome to the show.
Sure thing, Rochelle.
So let's start by talking about the highlights from Powell's speech, as well as the context for that guidance. What are your thoughts?
Well, just about everyone on Wall Street, at least, says it was historic. Yes, it's that important when the head of the Federal Reserve says that no longer is he only looking at inflation, right, the rise in American prices, to be 2%, and he wouldn't want it any higher than that. In fact, the Fed would raise interest rates to stop inflation. That was the old policy. He says now he could accept a higher inflation rate. It's kind of interesting because right now the inflation rate is only about 1%, and so he's thinking about the future. When the economy restarts, would the Fed be okay with the economy running hot with a lot of growth? Prices might go up. Also, a lot more jobs being formed. Usually very low unemployment also causes inflation because employers have to compete in order to hire people. Well, it turns out that Jerome Powell, he declared that he wants a little flexibility. Some people say, oh, so running the economy, is that an art or a science?
Right.
He's suggesting it's a little bit more of an art. He's going to keep an eye on things without having set rules as to how to behave.
So with the Fed's actions suggesting that they won't worry as much about low interest rates for an extended period of time, triggering a rise in prices, what does that translate to for the average American consumer?
Well, first of all, if you do depend on your savings, not much of a return. But of course, if you can't get much, say from a bank account, that kind of savings, or even bonds, then you're going to go towards stocks. And for various reasons, it's really good for the stock market. So it's an interesting statement. It was seen, as John was just reporting, as a good thing for Wall Street during a time that's about to be filled with uncertainty. Who knows if Donald Trump will win, Joe Biden will win, what the policies will be next year. And here's Jay Powell from the Federal Reserve saying, don't worry, we're watching absolutely everything, and signaling that interest rates won't be going up anytime soon.
Now, I want to look at the latest jobs claims report. What clues did this week's filings really offer about the health of the U.S. labor market?
Well, very slow growth, you'd have to say. You know, in general, what we had was a huge decline, of course, you know, in the months of March, April, and May, as it became clear that we have COVID, businesses were shutting down. And so President Trump is trying to boast that we're climbing back and even soaring back, but his detractors say, no, it's a very slow growth with employers being extremely cautious. And so you have to wonder about American factories. Will people really go back to work? Will there be customers all around the world? So many question marks. Again, in the President Trump speech, we're going to hear that everything is great and will be greater, but there's actually a lot to worry about, Rochelle.
So then, as we look at the run-up to the election, what should we be focusing on? Should it be these weekly employment reports, or should we be taking a broader look?
I'd have to say a broader look, of course, because we are in such unusual times. To a degree, every time there's a little bit of good news that there might be a good rapid test for COVID-19, or of course development toward a vaccine, you're going to find business sort of perking up, right? Stocks will probably rise, and we'll expect that factories will reopen, not to mention schools, who knows, travel, airlines, but not so fast, right? It takes a long time still to test vaccines, to see if it's effective, if Americans take them. And so the week-to-week employment numbers could be very erratic. However, again, with the political background, we do expect that the Trump administration will try somehow to engineer things so that in October things are looking brilliant, and on the horizon will be full recovery. The Democrats are suggesting that could not be genuine, not so fast, Rochelle.
I'm sure there'll be no lack of surprises in that run-up. Let's look now also at the revised GDP for the second quarter. What does that tell us about the positives as well as the headwinds that we're seeing in the economy?
Well, again, when we talk about growth at this stage, when we had this huge fall, this huge decline in the second quarter of this year, these are just very small steps to come back to what would be normal, etc. And so again, it's politically sensitive, and so one would like to see stronger GDP figures, but to the extent that it also depends on trade, everyone is wondering how U.S.-China talks will go. Will talks really start again in earnest? Will there be more steps toward trade deals with China, considering a lot of bitterness, again, with COVID-19 in the background? So in general, it is question marks. And if the Democrats do come into power, not just Joe Biden perhaps winning the presidency in November, but also maybe the Democrats will take over the U.S. Senate, where they're now in the minority, Well, some folks think that's bad for Wall Street because the Democrats are not a pro-business party, but others say the Democrats like to spend. They might move towards some sort of program where they're building bridges and highways and airports in this country. And so Wall Street is thinking we might win either way. If the Democrats win control of the government, the spending will be great, and Republicans are saying, no, the Democrats would be out of control. Stick with the president who, according to the Republicans, built the economy so well until COVID-19 stopped things.
Well, we shall certainly see. Thank you so much. Great to have you. Dan Raviv there, journalist and Newsday columnist.